So it's great to see you, Margot, and we welcome you here as she will share her heart with respect to what she has written about and what is happening in our world that we need to be aware of.
Hi, everybody. How are you? I'm Margot Russell. It's so nice to meet you all, and thanks for asking me to come tonight. I have been trying for a very long time to help people understand the truth of our times. So I'm here today to tell you about the world as I see it, and what I discussed tonight are my own theories. You're obviously way ahead of the game, so I don't think I have to worry. I was worried that, everybody's in a different phase of kind of waking up in the world. But I think it's important that no matter what one believes or what theories they're kind of currently subscribing to, that we all share that with each other. And we talk about our thoughts and ideas and our experiences, right? Tonight, I'm operating on the following premise, one that you all seem to understand, and I hope this is your understanding too, that rather simplistically, I believe there is a group of people in the world trying to create a one world government. And we are right now at war with these people, I believe, and most days it feels like a very one-sided war. It's tough, especially when you know what you are learning and what you believe. It's scary. Now, how could such a thing be raging unbeknownst to so many people? Like seemingly sometimes it feels like the rest of the country. They don't know. But I believe that two distinct realities exist that people can live in. You can live in either one. So let me give you an example. I have a lovely daughter. She's created a great life for herself in New England, and she married a hardworking, responsible family man. And she has this idea that everything is mostly fine. Okay, because now everybody kind of gets like things aren't perfectly fine, but maybe we can believe that things are mostly fine. And that feeling is reinforced to her by the media that she watches, her work environment, the friends she hangs out with, right? She lives in a fairly comfortable bubble. And I feel that bubble is purposely created for her, right? And because she only associates herself with people and media that kind of underscore her values, it constantly reinforces her beliefs about the world. And then she has me, her mother. There's the reality that I live in. I'm the only thorn in her side, really. And it's my life is a life of seeking and striving to understand the world as it really is, and looking deeply and critically into events, into history. It's a world that shows an America in decline, a world of strange events happening in ever-quickening succession, a world that is being pushed to the brink of war, a world that is being forced to change, that is on the cusp of a great reset, a world that has been lied to for many, many years, perhaps all of history, about many, many things. My daughter and I, two very different people, two entirely different realities. And that's how this exists. That's how it perpetuates and continues. We all can elect to live in either one. So I was a reporter and a news broadcaster for many years as a younger woman. In the late 1990s, I worked for a news organization in Massachusetts where I lived. I had at that time been working on and off in the field for maybe 10, 15 years. And I knew what news coming over the wire looked like, because I'd been doing it for a long time. And it was in the 1990s, the news became strangely biased. So I'm in, the mud pit through this whole change. Before the news changed, and then suddenly the news changes, and I'm still a reporter when the news decidedly takes a turn and changes. I saw it happen. I would rewrite the news. It was so biased, so slanted that I had gone to journalism school. You do not present biased news to your readers. You give them facts. They are to decide for themselves. So I would actually rewrite the news coming over the wire so I could maintain my own journalistic integrity. It was also at that time that Bill Clinton changed an FCC regulation where an entity, person, industry, whatever, could only own so many news outlets at one time, okay? And that was an important regulation because we need diversity in our news in order to maintain a democracy. And so we went from, I think, 156 news or people owning news organizations to 3, I think, or 4 today. Okay, that happened while I was a reporter in the 1990s. Suddenly, you know, we saw these big corporations coming in and buying up the news organizations where me or my friends worked, and it was becoming consolidated, right? So I'm a young woman, I'm a young reporter watching all of this happen. I'm a good dot connector, so it really alarmed me. And I think, you know, a lot of reporters just kept on marching on to this new reality, but I didn't. I started researching, I started digging really deep and learning a lot about the world that wasn't so pleasant to be learning. So we know from studying corruption in other countries that the first thing they do is take over the media.
Yep.
Right. So there I was in it, being taken over. So this plan by the people orchestrating radical change in the world has been going on for generations, I believe, but it was in the 1990s that some astute people could really start to see it. And we're going to look at that decade a bit tonight as I show you my own dot connecting course through time. So the news is being overtly changed. I'm a reporter, raised a million red flags for me. I was there reporting it. Again, I started going down some rabbit holes, finding out the world was really nothing like I thought it was. Now, if you think trying to wake people up now is hard, you should have been with me in the late 1990s, right? So no one could relate to what I was finding in my search for truth. I remember standing in the kitchen with my husband explaining like how banking works and why the Federal Reserve was created in 1913 and why printing money recklessly is so bad for a democracy. And he looked at me and said, well, you're a conspiracy theorist. Yeah, you know, my husband, you know, and who values my, hopefully, brain and my thoughts about things, but no, he just couldn't see it. He thought I was nuts, and he looked at me like I had 5 heads. And I realized then that to take people out of their comfort zones is a very difficult thing because you are challenging their foundational beliefs, right? And nobody's going to give those up very easily. Even I didn't when I was searching for the truth. And also because it's very nice in one's bubble, right? Sometimes I return to my own little bubble when this all becomes too much, and it's a great place to be. I'll call my daughter, hey, what's going on in the bubble world? Yeah, you can escape there sometimes, and sometimes you really need to. So eventually I left the news business, totally disillusioned, and I became an international tour director, very way on the other side of the spectrum. And so I have traveled the world, 35 countries with an eye on talking to people what's happening wherever I go, and I can sneak away from my groups or in evenings, whatever. I make it a point everywhere I go to talk to people. I have been doing this since the 90s. Talk, 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 talk. Tell people what's going on, you know. And it's so interesting because when I'm in another country, so easy to talk to them about this stuff. I mean, they get it. They're, you know, they've been oppressed by their governments for eons. I mean, they all know what it's like, and they're very able and willing to talk to you about it. And they know, a lot of people know what's going on in America and in their own countries. Not too long ago, I was in El Salvador, talked to our tour guide one night, late into the night. He knew censorship. He knew communism. He knew, you know, people disappearing and under rogue governments. He knew poverty instituted by government policies. He knew how governments can sneak in and quietly tinker with the rights of men. You go down to Florida, visit Miami. Immigrants from Cuba will tell you what they once experienced under Castro, that they see it happening here. They're familiar with it, and they know it, and they see it, and they'll tell you about it. I was on a playground about 10 years ago, and I was talking to a Cuban man who was on the playground also with his grandchild. And we just had the most amazing talk. But he said, listen, I'm an old man now. I was there when Castro took over the whole revolution, and I'm telling you that what happened there is happening here now. This was 10 years ago. So it's often easier to talk to people from other countries about this than it is with our own countrymen, because Americans, pampered, comfortable, confident, they're often the hardest to convince that there is something going on and that we are in trouble. We are just in trouble. So this whole idea of a new world order or a great reset, this idea that there are certain people who have spent generations trying to radically change the world isn't new. So again, back in the 90s, right, I'm doing all this research. I read a book by a man by the name of Carroll Quigley. Anybody familiar with him? Georgetown professor. And boy, he was part of the establishment. I mean, listen to this. He was an insider, the mover and shakers of the world by way of, he's an instructor at Princeton and Harvard, a consultant to the U.S. Department of Defense. He became disillusioned with the establishment. He sent off one of the first warning shots about this plan. And there are many others like him too. Bill Cooper, everybody know who Bill Cooper is. He was a best-selling author of the underground and iconic book, Behold the Pale Horse. And I suggest, if you haven't read that, to really read that. Cooper served with the Strategic Air Command, United States Air Force, and he held a secret clearance working on B-52 bombers. Then joined the United States Navy, was a member of the Office of Naval Security and Intelligence, and the list of his credentials goes on. So at some point after his military career ended, he also began warning people of a plan of the establishment to create a one world government. And boy, he was super outspoken. Got him killed, actually. He started a radio show. And I mean, he just started spouting this off. He predicted 9/11 event, a 9/11-like event. He did not let it go, and he was unafraid. And House Committee on Astronautics and Space
killed
Exploration
on his front porch,
in the U.S. Navy
right
in
after
the 1950s. And he wrote a book about this plan by the establishment to create a one-world government. 1950s, okay?
9/11
the book was called Tragedy and Hope. He wrote several books. He had some radical ideas, but what I'm asking you to take away from what he said was his insistence that the New World Order was and is a plan. The same New World Order of which its planners held a summit last week called the New World Order Summit. Go figure. Elon Musk spoke on a big screen at that last week. And if you missed that piece of news, you can go into Fox Business, I think, online and take a look at it. So they're no longer shooting people on their front porches who talk about the New World Order, are they? Now they're talking about it openly, admittedly, blatantly. They're advertising it, talking about it. And so my question is, if people can't see it now, when they're telling you every day what their plan is, what they're doing, we have a huge problem. This cognitive dissonance, you know. Some people call it brainwashing. I mean, it's a very big problem, and it's one that only we, I feel, can resolve by waking people up, planting seeds. So Klaus Schwab, head of the WEF, wrote a book about the Great Reset called The Great Reset. And people still don't get it. I tell people, like, well, here's his book. You know, here's their plan. Here's his book. You know, oh, okay, you conspiracy theorist. I just don't know how much convincing people need, but we got to keep trying. Also, in the 1990s, we had some really strange events occurring in our military. Was this a split of some kind? So again, I'm a young journalist watching all this stuff. There was an incident where Bill Clinton gave nuclear secrets to China, an event labeled China Doll. Anybody remember that? But that media coverage was largely covered up by the Monica Lewinsky affair. Also in this time frame, 4 boxes of plutonium ICBM nuclear triggers, which tune a missile to a frequency for detonation, they went missing. Okay, now, you know, the chain of command over like something like this is huge. You know, they just don't like, oh, mislabeled the darn triggers, put them on the wrong shelf, which is what they said. They labeled it helicopter parts. I mean, that is just so unlikely. It really is. So these triggers end up on a slow boat to China from Taiwan. But the Taiwanese intercepted them and confronted the United States about it. And heads rolled in the military after that. Later on, when Obama became president, he started slimming down the conservative generals within the military. He also began exchanging technology with China, exchanging secrets about our critical infrastructure in the USA. There was that program called 10,000 Talents, if you remember, where he allowed China and the US to exchange information between universities and share professors and information between China and the United States. And it has been suggested that what was really going on, so we have, you know, I'm talking about some things that are going on in the military in the 1990s. Maybe there's a faction, maybe there's a split in the military. And they get universities involved, maybe because they need really smart people to kind of reverse engineer something like the ICBM bombs I was talking about. Maybe we got university involved because we needed smart people to help with an important part of what the military or split military was trying to do. Again, a theory, but an interesting decade in the 90s with the military, to be sure. So in his second term, Obama fired another 135 constitutional and conservative admirals and generals. So it was a purge, right? So great changes with the military, and I think that's what scares me the most. Because if they're not on our side, you know, where does that put us, right? So how did what happened in the 90s position us today? You know, that is the question to be asked. And here we are today now, totally confused, I think, about the COVID virus and the government response and where did the virus come from. you know, there's so many issues. It is volume. It would take up 10 volumes of encyclopedias one day to like go through all of this. There's so much to look at. That river is so deep. I mean, you talk about the selling of American farmland to the Chinese, the mysterious destruction of countless food processing plants. Are you keeping up with that? The transportation industry being undermined, the food industry, our education system, the pharmaceutical industry. I mean, it just goes on and on. So I submit, and I try to explain this to people, that in order to create a one world government, you have to earnestly dismantle the most powerful country in the world. Slowly, but with great intention. You'd have to pick apart and undermine all of its institutions, its systems. You'd consolidate industry, especially technology, and you'd marry those industries to government. Already been done. We've watched the incredible rise of corporations and the destruction of small businesses, the dumbing down of Americans and our education system, the consolidation of food production. That happened starting in the 90s with Monsanto, who changed their name to Bayer, but because they had such a horrible reputation. But they've commandeered everything, education, the seed supply, our economy. There's barely an institution, an agency, an industry that hasn't been affected or changed. So here's what I'd like you to ponder, and this is my thought about things right now, if you haven't already thought about this. So America is a big problem for the powers that be. We're standing in the way of this world government. We're traditionally patriotic, we're powerful, we have strong feelings of democracy, lots of traditions, a special culture, and we're a big, well-oiled machine. So each and every day we observe the efforts of the powers that be to undermine all of our institutions, our culture, our way of life. So there is an effort to confuse us, have less faith in all things that make us America. So a lot of the craziness, okay, we observe is part of that effort to undermine the people of America and their strong feelings toward their country and its institutions. Not you, but the normies, I call them, okay? So the people who do not get what's going on. So let's, for an example, look at what happened in East Palestine, Ohio on February 5th, right? So it's unusual, right? This country is known for its emergency response after a disaster. I mean, we're infamous for it. Yet, uncharacteristically, the federal government never shows up there, never shows up to help the affected citizens there. Not for a long while. They ignore it and instead send Ukraine another $1 billion in the midst of it. So what I feel like, they're trying to get you to stop identifying with certain American ideals, to stop seeing your country in the same way. So we used to see FEMA. Wow, I mean, FEMA responded around the world to disasters. Oh, now look at, they're not responding at all to a train derailment, right? That is spouting poison far and wide. But they purposely didn't respond to it because they want you to look at FEMA like, oh, everything's falling apart. Look at FEMA, hasn't even responded to this. They did that with the CDC during COVID. They're trying to undermine every institution and agency so that the people who do not really get what's going on will think America's falling apart, that we can't trust our country anymore, that we can't trust in our institutions, and then boom, they'll offer the solution down the road, which is the Great Reset. Right? Much easier to sell that to people who believe the fabric of America has been unwoven. We're falling apart. So they'll say, well, we have the solution now. We're going to start a one world government, and they feel everybody will handily accept it because the America that they once knew is gone, and that will be the solution. That's what bad governments always do, offer a solution to the problem that they created that nobody gets that they created. So, right now I kind of watch them undermining the American airline industry. You know, a couple weeks ago they planted this story. Oh, Al-Qaeda has found a way to bypass airport security. This is an article last time. They always plant these fear things, but this one really had me thinking. And they're going to get on planes again and start, you know, hijacking or, you know, kidnapping people, crashing planes. There's an article too, the same week. Some senior airline pilots are just appalled at the inexperience and inability of new pilots to come and start flying. So now so these stories are planted again, trying to undermine your faith in the airline industry. That's what they're doing. Take every institution, undermine it, make people scared, make people think everything is falling apart. So, it'll be an easier sell, like I said, if we're all disillusioned about America one day, the Great Reset. Again, the topic of Klaus Schwab's book. I don't know how many different ways they can tell us that this is their plan. So what is this world we're trying to create? They're trying to create, we just heard that. It's all out there for us to see. You know, they tell us all of the time, a world of technology aimed at controlling behavior, no more cash, digital currency, jobs replaced by artificial intelligence, universal income to replace the income lost in those jobs, fewer people on the earth perhaps, us useless eaters. I think, who said that? Was it Kissinger? I think it was Kissinger who called us useless eaters.
Yeah. Harari uses useless eaters,
right.
As well as useless humans. That's what we
But useless eaters came about, I think, like in the 80s or something. It got leaked, like, oh, we're all a bunch of useless eaters. So they also talk about these 15-minute cities. You all familiar with that? They want to herd us into 15-minute cities whereby you would work and live and socialize and shop all within walking distance, 15 minutes walking distance of your house. That way we're all herded into these 600 square foot apartments. They can control your energy consumption, your carbon footprint. They can keep their eye on you. You're all kind of living in these small communities. And I love reading mainstream news once in a while. I mean, it kills me, but it's good to do. Architectural Digest had an article last week, a couple weeks ago. Oh, micro apartment living, the best thing to ever happen to humanity. Okay, this is a magazine that reports and does articles on the biggest, most luxurious houses in the world, every month. Look at where so-and-so lives, and look at who designed it, and these giant houses. And this magazine is now writing about micro apartments being the greatest thing in the world. And so there's always this kind of programming for people, right? So those are a couple of the things that I think we're facing in the future. And a question you might be asking is why, and why would anybody want to do this? My brother, who's kind of awake, says, they're all going to die anyway. Like, what do they care? What happens after they're gone? So here's how I see it. If you ask a banker why they're doing this, why this great reset is being pushed, they'll say that it's because we can no longer sustain the national and world debt, and so we must reset the economy. If you ask someone working in the energy industry, they'll claim that we are past peak oil now, and we're running out of energy, and so we must be forced to change our habits and our ways. If you ask a mental health expert why the Great Reset is being pushed upon us, they'll claim the global elite are psychopaths and after power and money. If you ask a conspiracy theorist, they'll say the urge to rule the world dates back centuries, hidden by secret societies. If you ask someone versed in the green movement, they'll say the cabal is saving the world from certain demise brought on by overconsumption. If you ask a politician, they'll say, what New World Order? What do you mean? If you ask a spiritual person or maybe a religious person, they may say, well, we're at the start of a great awakening. This has been prophesied in the Bible. So, that's a deep river. I mean, all of those answers could be true, right? They may all be correct. It's very hard to tell what's really going on. I believe that we only see 5% of what, you know, we could actually glimpse in all of this. We have access to about 5% and what you can kind of glean from your own astute observations. I think we could spend weeks deconstructing this all. It was very hard to choose what to speak about in a half hour. I wanted to kind of bring you down through how I arrived at my own conclusions from being a young reporter and then sticking with this topic and researching and really caring and really talking about it, almost for 30 years now. So in closing, I just want to thank you all for being here. What's happening here, this grassroots effort is, I think, the only hope that we have. So it's so wonderful to be here, and listening to all of this before I spoke was really heartwarming for me, and I'd like to come to some more meetings. I like to see that there are people that know and care about what's happening. I think, you know, we all have to get involved in local politics. We have to go to school board meetings, you know, be a part of public meetings. We have to be brave, and mostly we have to be vocal. You know, and you suffer consequences for that. I've missed some Thanksgivings when my family wasn't happy with the way I was thinking or what I was doing. You have to be willing to give up something, you know, to plant those seeds. Take some bravery. But united we are stronger. I think our only job right now, quite honestly, is to plant seeds and wake people up. We have to get more and more people understanding what is happening, because united we are so much more powerful, right? So I'm going to leave you with my motto tonight. I love the saying, if something can be destroyed by the truth, then it must be destroyed. And that's our jobs, right? So, let's see, what time is it? Do we have time for a couple of questions by anybody? Anybody want to ask anything?
There used to be a thing called Project 19, which sounds a lot like what we're describing with this World Forum. Did that disappear from the UN, or is it still back there?
Well, I don't know if I have the answer to that. What I know about the United Nations is, of course, Agenda 2020 and Agenda 2030, and you know, they're going, you know, the UN will actually be the government for the New World Order, for the one world government. And so, you know, there's a lot of things coming from there. I mean, what emanates from there is very, very important, but I don't know the answer to your question. Does anybody know what happened? They were supposed to vote the other day about whether we would have a one world response to future pandemics. Did anybody know what happened about that?
I didn't hear the outcome. That vote, I guess it was yesterday.
Yeah, and I should have checked on it today, because that is super important. I mean, that's the first step, you know, in uniting the world into one response and one government.
And equity means that our medicines now belong to the world. That's part of what that means.
Yes.
We got medicine over here, we worked, we earned it, we made it, but we don't own it anymore. It goes for equity to the rest of the world.
That's right. Yeah. So keeping in touch with what is coming out of the UN is really important to do, and we should check on that and see what happened. Anybody else have any?
Let me make a statement that I want you to comment on.
Okay.
I think I put this into the Post-Journal, the Observer, whatever. When you were talking about why would our country cooperate with China, and I put it this way: the deep state, and that pretty much means the left and a few rhinos. The deep state in this country wants what China has: complete control of the population in an authoritarian system with 100% surveillance. Comment on that. Okay. So, you know, there's such, just like in World War II, you know, all these shifting loyalties, and it
it is not clear to me what is going on with China. I mean, some things are very clear to me. To me, it's very clear that Ukraine was a very corrupt country, a playground for the deep state, and Russia's gone over there and obliterated biolabs and just gotten rid of that whole corrupt infrastructure. So that's clear to me. What's going on in China is not. And I think there's so much propaganda that comes out every day to obfuscate and confuse us all. And I'm not clear. I used to be clear about China. Oh, we're trying to emulate China, so they're paling up with China, so we can be run like China. But I don't know. There's people who say that China is, maybe more on the good side category. I mean, there's people who believe that. Well, they're teaming up with Russia. Some people believe that Russia is totally against the deep state. They behave as if they are. They talk about it all the time. They blow them out on lots of things. Listen to Putin's speeches. I mean, he seems to really detest the New World Order. He really does. But so why is now China kind of, there's shifting alliances, and I don't, again, I think we only know 5% of what was really going on.
If I was Putin, the thing I'd be most afraid of is China.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because all that mineral resources and wealth in Siberia, Russia doesn't have the population to defend it.
Yeah.
And no doubt China's eyeing that.
But what about Trump going over to China? The first politician ever, I think, to be in the Forbidden City. I mean, what is that all about?
And he went away very
I don't think that
unhappy.
we can know for sure. I just don't. Yeah.
What was visible was that he went away rather unhappy there because China tried to read him the Riot Act. And he cut it off. So I give him credit for that. I was never Trump's biggest fan, better than the alternative, but he had the guts to say, this is it, I'm out of here. So.
Well, have you heard of devolution? Is anybody familiar with devolution? Devolution is a plan by a government that should there be a coup, that the real government keeps operating in the background. And devolution is a plan that every president has to put in place when they become president. And there is somebody out there in the world, is everybody on Substack? So much good stuff on Substack. But, there's a gentleman you read, some of it's way over my head, but, you might be tempted to think that there is a devolution plan in operation right now. And he shows papers and executive orders made by Trump that show that there is some kind of devolution going on. I don't know. I mean, again, who knows? We only know 5%.
Have you heard of Jared Jackson? Telegram.
Yes.
He's a military.
Yeah, I just read something about. Yeah.
And he was saying he was impressed with Afghanistan and the tribal leaders that were able to resist military powers like Russia, like the United States, and why was because of their globalism, because of their ability to live local.
Yes. And that makes a lot of sense, doesn't it?
Right.
Yeah, it really does.
That is, one of our strategies needs to be live local.
That's right. That's right.
I'm to the point where, right at the moment anyway, I am just so overwhelmed trying to know what direction to go.
I know. Me too. I mean, I have a whole basement full of food, planting gardens. It's like you kind of run around, scrambling around. Should I buy silver? Should we sell the house before the house? I mean, every day you're constantly in a quandary about how to carry on with your life. That's awful, but you have to reserve a part of yourself in the midst of all this, to being human, to being happy, to seek out others,
Live local.
and to live. I do too.
We need to have relationships.
And I'll tell you real quick about that is that if the SH IT hits the fan, I want to be in Chautauqua County, right? They grow food here, you have good neighbors, there's an abundance of water, you know, I mean, there's good stuff. This is where I want to be. I mean, we have a house in southern Florida, and I'm like, I'm out of there.
So you had print or TV, radio up in Illinois?
What in my career? Well, I have done all of it. I've worked in TV, and I used to work at WKBW up in Buffalo. I grew up in Amherst. I was there when Irv and Don were on there. I'm dating myself.
11
Yeah.
o'clock, do you know where your children
Yeah,
are?
oh my gosh, yeah, 11 o'clock.
I lived in southern New Hampshire
Yeah,
from 1993 until
Yeah.
2013. And I can tell you exactly what you're seeing. You saw
Yeah.
the changes
yes.
in the way things are being reported in
Yeah.
the media. And
I was there. Yep, I was there. My favorite mode of communication back in those days was radio news. Nobody cared what you looked like. You didn't have to do your hair. But, you know, there's no. It was just so much easier just to get on the radio and you know report the news and not have to worry about all that other stuff. Because again, in the 90s, they started consolidating news and. You know, all the bubble-headed bleach blondes, as the song says. I mean, I just detested all of that stuff. The lipstick and the, you know, it just wasn't who I was.
I remember the song,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, it's the Eagles guy.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much, everybody.
I want to conclude the night because I think there are birthdays in the room. Happy birthday right here. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday